Hey, it's Dr. Michelle Gordon, and thanks so much for being a part of the Menopause Movement podcast, and welcome back. So, we have Stephanie Davis this week, and she is an Enneagram expert, and we're going to find out what the Enneagram is, what your type might be, and the general characteristics of each type. She has a website called successstyle.com, and you can go there to take the Enneagram test at the end of the podcast. She's been doing the Enneagram for about 30 years. She works with corporations primarily, and we're so lucky to have her here. Learning more about the Enneagram can help us so much with self-discovery, and menopause is such a time of self-discovery that I was super excited to talk to her about it today. Now, we're going to learn this week that there are 9 Enneagram types, that the Enneagram is truly a mathematical symbol, that there's a law of 3 and a law of 7, and that there's forces that help to give us the self-discovery that we need to understand our subconscious programming. It's really fascinating stuff. Now, at the end of the episode, make sure you visit our website, drmichellgordon.com/podcasts. Don't forget the S on the end. You can find the show notes and the links that we mention with Stephanie Davis. Also, if you enjoy this episode, please make sure you subscribe so you are always the first to know when a new episode is released. Now, thanks so much for being a part of the Menopause Movement podcast. Now, let's head on over to the interview with Stephanie Davis and learn all about the Enneagram. So, welcome back to the Menopause Movement podcast. Today, I'm joined by Stephanie Davis. Hi, Stephanie. How are you?
Hi, how are you? I'm good.
It's beautiful where you are.
Yeah, this is my backyard. It's kind of a nice,
awesome,
crisp fall day.
I want to understand, you are an expert in the Enneagram.
Yes.
Among other things. You have many expertises I've seen, but I think today we should just focus on the Enneagram. And number one, I think we should start with, what is it?
So the Enneagram is a very deep dive into what makes you tick. So unlike most personality systems, which usually have kind of like a cluster of preferences or behaviors, the Enneagram really goes way deeper than behavior, which is why it's hard to test for. There's tons of, free tests all over the place. There's a whole bunch of paid tests. There's no accurate Enneagram test because nobody really knows what's deep inside there unless they've gone through, tons of psychoanalysis or something, and they've really been introspecting for many, many years. Most people are not really aware of the wiring that's making them tick. And so Enneagram tests have to test for behaviors or things that are statistically tend to go with one type or another, but that's not definitive. So any type could do any behavior, and any, because you do a particular thing or you like a particular thing does not exclude an Enneagram type, nor does it make you an Enneagram type. So that's where all the confusion comes from, because people think it's like personality types where, if you fit this, this, and this, then you go into that box.
Right.
But really what it is it's 9 different egoic structures. So when you're very, very little, some say you're born with your Enneagram type, at least your temperament. And then very, very early on, your psyche makes decisions about what the world is about and what you're going to need to do in order to be loved and to survive in this world. And those very core decisions form your egoic structure. And so it's 9 different egoic structure types.
Why did I think there were 12? I thought it was like a zodiac.
No, and a lot of people, because the Enneagram is numbers, there's type 1, type 2, type 3, people think it has something to do with numerology as well, which it does not. It has absolutely nothing to do with numerology. The 9 positions on the Enneagram symbol just needed to be named something. They could have been named Iba Buba Gi, but somebody just said 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so those positions don't mean anything numerically. Like 9 is not higher than 8 in some way, or lesser than. There's nothing significant to the fact that there's numbers attached to it, other than that the entire symbol is actually mathematical. I mean, the whole Enneagram is actually a symbol that dates back to Pythagoras, at
Okay.
least. And
Wow.
they keep finding more and more and more ancient roots to the symbol and a lot of the historical roots of the Enneagram. But the modern Enneagram only came about, since about the 70s. The Enneagram of personality, as most of us call it, that has only been around since the 70s. But the symbol that the Enneagram is based on has been used to map anything. So the circle, the outside circle, represents the infinity where there is no separation. And then there's a triangle, which represents the law of three, which is the law that causes anything to come into formation. Nothing gets created without the law of three. And then the law of seven is the hexad symbol inside there. So it's three different symbols overlaid on top of each other. The hexad comes from the law of seven, which is a law which governs how things play out. So like from the time it's created till the time it recycles to another birth or something, how something plays out is governed by the law of seven. So that's a long, complicated story we don't need to get into, but it's very significant that the symbol represents these forces, the force going around the circle, the force going around the triangle, and the force going across the hexad. And that's how you know where everything has to sit. So they used the Enneagram symbol to map anything. You could use it to map baking a cake. You can use it to map organizational development processes in companies. You can use it to map anything. But in order to use it to map something, you have to divide the something into the 9 elements. And then you have to figure out where would they have to sit, because all of the energy has to work. So there has to be a natural clockwise flow. There has to be a natural flow on the triangle, and the triangle has to have a special relationship with the circle. Those are the 3 shock points where reality hits potentiality. And then the hexad has to work out to where 1428571, 1428571, 1428557 repeats, which is the law of entropy. So you'd have to figure out the 9 elements, place them around the circle, and see if those patterns worked. So that's what happened in the 70s. Oscar Ichazo, a psychoanalyst, took psychology, took ego development, and he mapped it using the Enneagram. And so that's where we got the personality, the Enneagram of personality that we all know now, is that he figured out where these 9 egoic dilemmas, if you will, needed to sit in relationship to one another on that diagram. And that's how we ended up with those 9 types. So the spots are significant, but the fact that they're numerically labeled is not really significant.
I got it. Okay. So for somebody who's never heard of the Enneagram, and I think that's a lot of people, because I only heard of it just last year. It's the first time I ever heard of it. Can you give I know you just gave us a basic overview, but can you give us a little bit more about what kind of self-discovery we can get from taking an Enneagram test, and maybe a resource for one of the best ones that's going to give us the most information?
Sure. So what you can get from learning the Enneagram is a perpetual self-busting machine. I paid a lot of money a while back to an organization that puts you through these weekend events. And, in that event, you learn something about your already always listening that's kind of behind the scenes running everything, and you didn't realize it was really doing that. And you walk away from there, people declare life-changing, insights from having been able to bust themselves. It's like when you take a fish out of water and let them see the water they've been swimming in. They never realized it before because it was everything. It was clouded, water was all they knew. And so to me, you could save yourself a whole lot of money not going through those kinds of programs. Not that I'm saying don't, but that's a lot of effort for one weekend worth of value. Whereas with the Enneagram, the minute you learn your Enneagram type and you really see and study the patterns that they're talking about, the first response you'll have is, well, I think I'm a number, whatever. Let's say you think you're a 3. I think I'm a 3, but, and you're going to say, I don't do, and you're going to say all kinds of things that they attributed to 3. And you're going to say, I don't do any of that. And then as you go through your day and you go through your life, all of a sudden you're going to say, oh my gosh, I do that. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I mean, suddenly your entire life becomes this kind of like unveiling of you being able to see what you couldn't see before about yourself. And so all of your relationships suddenly become like a petri dish. All of your job, your marriage, your children, everything becomes this massive unveiling of not only your own motives, but even other people's motives and things like that. So it's very addicting, actually. You're going to end up kind of going down this rabbit hole of really seeing things about yourself that you never realized. And
So
the
just
growth
just
potential. Go ahead.
yeah, I just want to ask a clarifying question. So it sounds to me like what you're saying is that by taking the Enneagram test and getting a number, say, or two numbers often is what we get, somebody can get a peek into the subconscious programming that's moving their that's like really moving their lives, right? So maybe why they have certain behaviors. For me, it's like the only thing that I've not been able to be successful at in my life over the past 10 years is weight loss. And I've had spurts where I've been able to lose weight and then I'll just go right back. And that to me is very frustrating because I have the motivation and I have the desire, but I don't have the behavior. And and I think that, I mean, I on the Enneagram, I'm an 8/1 or a 1/8, depending on which one I take. And what I find very fascinating about that is that as I've grown over the last year, I've learned that the only way that I'm ever going to get a change in my life is if I start acting like that person now, even before I actually have the results I want. I have to be that person. So the so I guess the more clarifying question for me is, once we get a peek into the underlying subconscious kind of automatic behaviors, does taking the Enneagram and understanding it help people to actually modify their behaviors in a way that is more positive?
Presumably. I mean, obviously, people are only going to change to the level that they want to change, and a lot of people will just learn the Enneagram and use it as a parlor game or whatever. But people who really want to take it on, people who really want to make changes in their lives, I think will find great help with the Enneagram, because all roads seem to lead back to your what's called passion and fixation. So let me explain that. In the Enneagram, one of the roots of the Enneagram goes back to Gurdjieff, who's an ancient philosopher, not that ancient, but anyway, he talks about how there's three parts to everybody. You have the head, you have a heart, and you have a gut, right? So you have your mental, you have your emotional, and you have your gut instinct. And so the Enneagram, what makes you your type is really how you are, I'm going to say, messed up in those three areas. So that's the signature. So the Enneagram is really 9 ways of being messed up. Okay. Let's just cut to the chase here. When you learn
Okay.
Enneagram type, it's not a good thing. Okay. But so very specifically, there's 9 different signatures of how those three things get distorted. And so each of the types, as a little child, develops a fixation, which is how you're mentally distorted, and a passion. And unfortunately, that word has a positive context in modern day, but in the Enneagram terms, it's an emotional distortion is
Okay.
what it's technically called, your passion in the Enneagram. So your fixation and your passion are how you're messed up emotionally and mentally. And then your subtype, what people call your subtype in the Enneagram, they'll say you're either a self-preservation, a social, or a sexual number 8 or number 1, right? So they say that's your subtype. So you're a sexual 1 or a social 1 or self-pres 1. What that means is that the sexual or social or self-pres instinct is the one that got the most distorted. So again, that's the way you're instinctually messed up. So those are the three things: passion, fixation, and your subtype. Those are the three things. So within each of the 9 types, the little child made a decision and had to close off a part of themselves. So let's just start. I don't know if I should start with 9 or start with 1 or start with 8.
I mean, we can talk about. I mean, I'm really kind of an open book, so we can talk a little bit about me. And unfortunately, I don't have my results to share with you, other than I took the test that is associated with the book, The Road Back to You. And, whether that's a valid test or not, I don't know, but it was free.
What, did you pay for it?
No.
Oh, then that's a different test. There is no, well, anyway, yeah, that's fine. Let's talk about you. You say that you come out either as an 8 or a 1.
Yeah,
So
depending on which day I take it. And what is very interesting, so if you're also an expert in the Myers-Briggs, right?
not as much, but I
Right.
know it. Yeah.
So what's very interesting for me is that depending on the day when I take the Myers-Briggs, I'm either an INFJ or an ENTJ,
Interesting.
right?
Well, the thing about the Myers-Briggs, and I don't want to speak to the Myers-Briggs, is that they do say that your Myers-Briggs can change.
Okay.
And I know for me, like I'm an ENXP, because the F and the T, you cannot ever make one higher than the other on me, no matter what. And socionics people go crazy with me on that, but it's like, there is no one higher than the other on my F and my T. But that gives me a little bit of insight as to your Enneagram type to a certain degree.
Yeah.
There's some correlation, not exact. Theoretically, any Enneagram type could be any Myers-Briggs type, but there is, again, correlations. So let's talk about you. But in order to do that, let me go to the three triads of the Enneagram, because you're in one of the triads for sure. So
Okay.
the triads are gut, heart, and head. Even though we each have our own heart, head, and gut, every single person has all three. Within the Enneagram, 3 of the 9 types are what we call gut types. They are in the gut triad. That's the 8, 9, and 1. Those 3 at the top. Those are the gut types. And
Okay.
then 2, 3, and 4 are the heart types. And the 5, 6, and 7 are the head types. And so they're sitting on the circle in the area where there's a particular issue that's much more important than all other issues to those types. So the gut types, it's all about boundary. It's all about being a body in a skin with potential positions and enemies and vulnerabilities and barriers and boundaries. And it's all about sort of like the black and the white. Where's the line? Where's the boundary? What's in, what's out, what's accepted, what's not, what's friend, what's foe, what's black, what's white. So 8, 9, and 1 all have that kind of deep orientation about having kind of a gut reaction to the world. And so the key emotion involved in that is anger. Now, within each of the triads, there's a key emotion, and each within the 3 types, one will sort of like just overdo it, one will sort of underdo it, and another one has a really weird relationship with it. So with anger, 8 is the type who will have no problem doing anger. Yep, do anger, done, next, no big deal. Like nothing, no problem with anger. Like just they can get angry, they can be angry, and then they're not angry, and that's fine, and they don't have any issues around it.
Yeah.
Like it's very bold and out there.
Right.
1 on the 9, on the other hand, completely wants to deny anger. 9 doesn't want to be angry ever. 9 wants to be peaceful and calm and never acknowledge anger. So they just become like a tea bag where everything flows through them, and they just, they might be passive aggressive, but they, for the most part, almost never like cause conflict or be involved in conflict. They want to forget boundaries. They're like, can't we all just get along? That's the peacekeeper, the harmony. So they're right in the heart of the anger triad, sort of denying that anger and separation exists. And then the 1 is the one that takes it to almost an intellectual level and becomes kind of like the keeper of the rules. So the 1 decides that the world, there's right and there's wrong and there's good and there's bad, and you're supposed to be good. And so we're all supposed to be good, and we're all supposed to be improving and getting better. That's the whole purpose of life, is betterment. And so they focus on anger kind of from a judgment perspective. And so they're the ones who have that as a fixation. They're the ones who have it as a problem. 8s don't have it as a problem, even though they might do it more often. They don't have a problem with it. 1s, they feel guilty for being angry because they want to be good people, but they're angry all the time because they're judging all the wrong that's going on. And they want to stuff it. They don't want to be angry. So they have this very difficult relationship with anger because they have a lot of it, but they don't want to have it. And, they can't deal very effectively with it. So 8, 9, and 1 are all gut types, and you're saying that you come out either as an 8 or a 1
Yeah.
test. So we know that you're an assertive type.
I'm a surgeon.
And so the differences between 8 and 1, the most obvious difference is 8s have no problem at all being a bad guy. Like they kind of even sort of like that, being the rebel, being the one, on the back of the Harley coming in and just being, like born to be bad. They're like, yeah, like they have almost an affinity to being the outcast, the bad one. No problem at all. The 1 wants to be the good one. The 1 wants to be good, wants to be seen as good. And
that kind of explains all my conflict.
1 is horrified at being seen as bad. They don't want to be bad. They want to be good. So that's a huge difference. But the other difference is that 8 is the most just raw, honest, truth-telling, let the chips fall where they may. They don't sort of convert themselves to society. They just sort of are who they are. And so now let's talk about this deep psychic wiring. The little 8, as a little tiny child, decided that the world is about power. There are people who have power, people who do not have power. Power can be hurtful, power can be abused. And so the 8 decides 2 things. One is I will vigilantly watch over the power, and I will try to make sure that the power is right in every situation. Now, sometimes that means I want to have the power, but sometimes it just, if power is in place, that's okay. The 8's fine with that. But if power is being abused, if power is being used against genuine victims, 8's, want to take out that power. They want to equalize that. They want to fix that. They're very vigilante, in wanting for people not to be abusing other people. Like, you should not be abusing power. But the more core decision that's made by the little 8 is, I will never be vulnerable. I will always be powerful. And so nobody will be able to hurt me. Nobody will be able to control me. I will not be vulnerable. And that decision is underpinning everything in the 8's life. And rediscovering the innocence that's being protected under there is the lifelong journey for the 8. Really getting in touch with that soft, innocent little being that doesn't have to puff itself up and be, falsely strong for its entire life. That's the battle for the rest of the life, because once that hardening takes place, then it becomes very difficult for the 8 to ever, enter that chamber. That's what gets shut off, if you will, is that innocence. And so that's the journey. That's the situation of the 8. And what 8's will find when they know the Enneagram is, even when you don't think that little storyline is running the show, upon deep analysis, it's like all roads lead back to that lack of vulnerability. All roads lead back to that eschewing of the innocence.
Yeah.
So that's the storyline of the 8.
Well, that's really, I mean, it's really interesting because, I had Deirdre Fay on the podcast not too long ago, and as you probably know, Deirdre's all about psychological triggers and finding safe spaces and that sort of thing. And we talked a little bit about my history, and there's a whole year of my life I don't remember, and I don't think I'll ever get those memories. I think my brain actually secreted chemicals to like obliterate them. And there's like horrible sexual abuse in my childhood. So it all makes sense when you say that I'm an 8 and then I don't want to be vulnerable. And that plagued me a really long time. It caused problems in my surgical residency. It caused problems in all of my relationships. And it wasn't until discovering meditation, actually, and starting to get into, more of a vulnerable space with myself and trying to contact the subconscious mind, that I've been able to even manage, that lack of vulnerability. There's also a portion of me that is just very analytical and I think almost like a computer. And so it's very hard for me to understand some social cues or um, understanding, some certain nuances of relationship it can be very difficult for me. And I've acknowledged that. I mean, can be troubling for my marriage, but I'm honest about it. So that's just a little background, that helps. It helps me to understand a little bit, why I identify more as an 8, even if the numbers say that I'm more of a 1. But I
Yes, and there's really, you have to understand there are no accurate Enneagram tests. That at the very most, even the most expensive Enneagram test, the maximum that it can do is give you a starting point of like where to look.
Right.
Because we pick up our behaviors from parents, we pick them up from social expectations, we pick them up from all over the place. And this particular wiring sort of can't be asked about in a test, like it just doesn't
Yeah.
work. So the tests are proxies. But let me talk about 1 for a minute, just to see how you resonate with that. So the little tiny 1 got a really strong sense of wrong, like wrong, like bad, like you are wrong, you are bad, like you're going to be punished to hell, kind of a sense of wrongness, that sense that we are corrupt, if you will. Somehow the little 1 got a sense of that and just got really, really built around that and said, I will always be good. I will know what is right and what is wrong, and I will be right. I will be good. I will be the good boy. I will be the angel, not the devil. I'm going to be on the right side. And so the whole life, gets created around making sure that they know what is the right side, that they stand for the right side, that they work on the right side, that they, stick with the right side. And so they become very guarded against ever being wrong or corrupt. And let me just go back to the 8 for a second, or kind of do both here. But so we end up with kind of a shadow, or sort of like a sensitivity that we're not really that aware of. It skews our reality. So with the 8's going to skew reality in thinking that there's way more enemies than there actually are, or
Yeah.
there's way more opposition than is actually going on, or there's way more, abuse of power than is actually going on. The 8 will skew that way. The 1 will skew the way of feeling like there's way more wrong happening, there's way more bad going on, and the 1 becomes very defended against criticism, because the 1 has done everything in their power to make sure at every moment in time that they couldn't possibly be doing anything wrong. And so for criticism to come in, it's like a shock. It's like,
Yeah.
how is that even possible? Like they have a little slave driver. They have the worst inner critic of anyone. They've got this little slave driver on their shoulder just telling them that they're an idiot and a schmuck, and not doing good enough. Like day in and day out, they're beating themselves. They're very, very self-disciplined and almost hateful. So the road for the 1 is to open up to the idea that maybe they don't have their hands on the big rule book in the sky. And maybe that inner voice that they're hearing, that inner critic, is actually just a psychological mechanism that's tormenting them, and that they don't have to give it so much credence, and that they can ease up, and that they can not listen to that so much, and that they can, like getting out from under the tyranny of that is
Yeah.
the lifelong goal, is the lifelong journey of the 1, because it's just so real to them. And to them, it really is the rule book in the sky. It's not like they don't think that they made it up. They don't think that
Right.
they're judging other people. They think they're just trying to help all of us not be judged by the rules,
Yeah. So
So
that's interesting, because in my program, the very first homework I give to the people who join the program is to pay attention to their inner voice and just write down what they're hearing every hour. And we don't talk about any Enneagram, but we do talk about what to do with that. But just to kind of become aware that there's another voice inside your head, and that maybe that's not you.
right,
And
right.
so but let's continue. So we've gone through 8 and 1. I think we should just kind of go through, if you don't mind, if we could just go
Yeah,
through
so
all of
the
them.
little 9 decided that the world was very like chaotic and discordant. Like the 9 is affected by the disharmony. So all of the stuff going on, and the 9 just sort of holds back and decides not to show up. The 9 says, it's like there's so much sort of like separation and problem and chaos and whatever going on in the world, I think I won't add to that. And so the 9 really never develops a very concrete ego. The 9 just decides to be an untype and to just go along to get along, and just be the one who just goes along. And so they never show up with a concrete position. And in a way, this kind of mimics spiritual bypass, because a lot of people see 9s and they say, wow, they're just so naturally non-upset, and they forgive, and they want peace, and they don't have all these weird things going on that everybody else does. And so they think the 9s are somehow like enlightened. But the problem is that the 9 didn't show up like with an ego to then detach from the ego to then be enlightened. They just sort of, as an egoic move, decided not to show up. And there's this very, very strong passive aggressive, I'm not gonna, F you going on in there. That's sort of like, heck no, I won't go. You can't affect me. I'm this rock in the stream. And you guys all think I'm just peaceful and all that kind of stuff, because I'm just going to keep everything all tightly in here like this. And just going to go through life. And so what the 9 has to give up by being the untype is really being able to really know their own feelings, know their own goals, know their own wishes, their desires. They sort of haven't formed it themselves, so everybody just plants in their field. Like they don't plant their own corn, so everybody else will just plant wheat or tomatoes or whatever they want, and the 9 just kind of lives vicariously through everyone else. So the journey for the 9 is to wake up and actually show up. And it takes a lot of courage, because to the 9, they feel like if they show up, then they're going to be in opposition to people. There's going to be separation. There's going to be conflict. There's going to be all those things that they think they cannot handle. And so it's quite a journey of courage for them to
Yeah.
really stand up and say, this is who I am. This is what I want. This is what I want to do. And even if that's in opposition to other people. So that's the journey for the 9.
Okay.
So the 2s, 3s, and 4s are our heart types. And that's a little bit of a misnomer, because in today's day and age, when people talk about the heart, oftentimes they're actually talking about spirituality or something.
Yeah.
So we're actually talking about social relationship dynamics here when we say the heart types. 2s, 3s, and 4s, their overarching issue is shame. Their overarching issue is, am I going to be accepted, or am I going to be rejected by people? Like how I fit in, whether I'm loved or not, whether I'm approved of or not, is all important to the 2, 3, and 4, how they are seen by other people. And there's a whole lot of other background in the Enneagram that talk about how these different phases might have come about in psychological development. So they think that with the 2s, 3s, and 4s, something about how they were seen, by their caretakers probably was the issue. But nevertheless, they have a social focus. And so the 2s, 3s, and 4s each have a different one. The little 2 decided that the way that you get accepted and loved in the world is to basically be indispensable. Be someone's best friend, be their best helper, just become totally indispensable to people. And so they could have written the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Any 2 could write that book.
Yeah.
Because they know how to complement, their passion becomes flattery. They know how to just get anybody to be really excited to know them, because they know how to just get in there and start complimenting and building people up. They know how to give people confidence and give them praise and give them flattery and give them gifts and give them favors and all those kinds of things. So they become very well liked for all that they do for people. The problem with that is that they secretly, in the back of their mind, know or believe to themselves that they're singing for their supper. I mean, 2s, 3s, and 4s all kind of believe, I have to sing for my supper. I have to earn, approval. And so the 2 believes that if they were ever not able to help and compliment and build up people and stuff, that they would be utterly rejected and loveless. And that would be absolutely death, because the 2, more than any of the types, loves love. The 2 wants to be loved. The 2 wants to be loved. They do not want to be rejected. That's like their kryptonite.
Yeah.
And so they kind of get into the groove of helping everyone. And the 2 is an interesting type because more than any of the other Enneagram types, they're kind of in a little bit of a delusion about themselves. They believe that they just help because they like to help. They do not believe or have a tie-in. They don't notice that they're doing it in order to potentially be loved and to survive in the world. They think that it's free. They think that they're like unconditionally loving. So what they have to do is they have to start to tap into and notice how actually it's not unconditional at all. Actually, they have these deep inner contracts going on, and they deeply believe that by doing this, it will earn them this. And they start to see that most of the relationship problems that they have in life are tied to the fact that they're not even acknowledging that they kind of had one of those contracts going on. But other people can feel it. Everybody else can feel it. But the 2 doesn't know they're doing it. The 2
Okay.
thinks that they're unconditional when other people are like feeling like some hooks in there and stuff. And so so there's a whole lot of delusion that goes on in the 2's world. And their journey with the Enneagram is starting to see that and starting to get in touch with the little starving little person, or let's say dying of thirst. A 2 is like someone who's dying of thirst, who's standing on the line at one of those marathons, handing out water to everyone. They're dying of thirst, but they're handing out water to everyone. And so the 2 has to recognize what it's like to actually drink water themselves, to completely self-nurture. They need to get in touch with what that's about. And they need to recognize that a lot of times this giving of the water is because secretly they're hoping that someone will give water to them. And uncovering that whole thing, after once a 2 goes through the shock of the whole thing, it's usually a pretty easy journey after that. I wouldn't say easy, but I mean it's a pretty straightforward journey after that. But that original delusion that they go through is quite shocking for 2s when they come to the Enneagram. And then the 3s. So the 3 is the most obvious image type. 3s typically want to be seen as successful, and they want to be seen as productive and pragmatic and successful and get it done and win. They're very, very competitive. They're always thinking about winning because they want to be number 1. Not just like, they don't just want to be liked, they want to have beaten everybody else to get there. Like they want to be seen as better than other people, superior.
Yeah.
They want to be admirable. They actually want to get applause from an audience. They want to be socially above. That's what the 3 is all about. Now, I haven't gone into the subtypes in these 9, and I don't really think we probably have time in this, but I'll just mention here so you can imagine it's true for the other types as well. The self-pres, social, and sexual 3 show up very differently. So a self-pres 3 is not going to be so imagey, showy. They're not going to be wearing the fancy clothes and wanting to be seen. They're more like trying to unearth or trying to create a legacy. They want to have bank accounts and they're doing it all kind of behind the scenes as a self-preservation thing. They're not coming across as so showy. Social 3s want to have all the awards. They want all the accolades and the applause and so forth. And sexual 3s want to be the perfect specimen of masculine, or the perfect specimen of a feminine. So they're going to be the really showy, like put me on the cover of a magazine because of how I look. A sexual 3 would be more prone to that. Social 3 would be more prone to, prestige and position. And a self-pres 3 will be more prone to building an empire, whether people know about it or not. But 3s all want that external. So what's the journey of the 3? The little 3 decided that in order to be loved and to survive, I need to be somebody. And be somebody means do something. And so they become a little human doing, not a human being. They just, like, from a very early age, don't even care what they feel, what they think, what they want, who they are. It's just, who do I need to be? Who do I need to be? What do I need to do? So what's the role? What's the goal? I'm on it. And it works really, really well. Threes don't usually come to the Enneagram until they've had some massive collapse or something, massive breakdown of their whole structure, because it works really well.
Like
You know,
a
they
like a
just
life-threatening illness, for example?
life-threatening illness, major failure, total public humiliation, loss of everything, you know, something like that.
Yeah.
And, you know, because otherwise they just kind of look at it and they're like, and why would I want to do that? You know, like how would that help me? You know, they don't see how discovering their inner truth, or, you know, how they really feel, they don't really know what that has to do with anything. Because what's the role? What's the goal? I'm on it. And personal feelings and stuff like that, it's like, I don't know, that just sounds like a big detraction. They don't really get that. And so when a three comes to a place where they start to honor and realize that they actually, there's a person in there, not just the role, not just whatever they chose to be, but there might be something inside there that actually had some kind of identity or reality prior to the roles. And when they start to embrace that and look at that, that's a very interesting journey for the threes. And like, to me, one of the best three stories was, I have a friend who was very famous, and he went through a very public collapse, and he literally believed that nobody would ever love him again. I mean, he truly believed that. Like, he didn't even want to go outside of his house. Like, he totally could not believe that he would ever be accepted again. And when we finally got him out into the public and everybody, you know, embraced him and was, it was like the most, it's like, it's very tear jerking for me, because for him to actually even think that it would be possible that people loved him for who he was, just, just because, and not because he was this famous, rich, but just because, was such a revelation to him, like a thought that he could have never allowed himself to have in his lifetime. And so it's kind of like a house of cards that the threes are sitting on. As long as they're succeeding, they got great self-esteem. But inside is the deepest fear of them all, that really I'm nothing. And I have to keep succeeding in order to be something.
Yeah.
And when they could just unhook that and realize that, guess what? You're actually something without doing anything. That's such a revelation for threes. I love it when threes find that, it's very, like you see, tear jerking for me. But anyway, that's the journey of the three. The four. The four is also an image type, but they sort of like gave it up right from the beginning. They sort of decide, I have been rejected. I have been abandoned. I am not accepted by society. And it's because I'm so different. And so the four has this difference. And it has a two-sided feeling to it. On the one hand, they feel like, I'm so special. And they're very proud of that. I'm special. I have taste. I'm unique. They like their specialness. On the other hand, they can feel very defective, and they can just they have more self-loathing than other types, reportedly. They can feel so defective and so different in ways that are just like, that hideous hunchback monster or something. So they go from feeling I'm so special and better than everybody to I'm so defective, what's wrong with me? And their fixation and passion have to do with envy and longing. So it's not that they're jealous, like they don't want what you have. That would just be too uncouth. They have almost a hateful, energized envy, which is fueled by a pain that they don't have what would make them happy. They don't have what would make their life complete. So it's like there's this missing piece, there's this deep pain, there's this horrible wounding that they're living with, and it'll never be fixed, and they hate that. So when they see happiness and love and all kinds of different things going on out there, they can feel a very painful kind of an envy and a longing, wondering, why me? Why not me? Like, what's wrong with me? So they're kind of a tortured soul to a certain extent. And again, the three subtypes will be very different. The self-pres 4 doesn't ever really show that. So they're not walking around being obviously wounded. They are more like long-suffering. They're holding it in. The social 4 is the one who's kind of like publicly wailing all the time. And the sexual 4 is a very a very passionate character who has a lot of anger and a lot of rage and a lot of Claudio Naranjo once said, if you ever see a woman up on the third floor throwing the man's clothes out onto the street, that's a sexual four. There's a lot of passion in a sexual four.
Yeah.
But the fours bring us so much of the beauty in the world. The fours go where the rest of us are just too scared to go. They go into the depths of emotions, and they pull out the best of beauty and introspection, on steroids. Like, they really are able and capable of going into emotions and holding empathy and compassion and really getting into the depths of the human experience, in ways that most of the other types don't dare do.
Right.
So they bring a lot to the world, and their journey is to just recognize that they really aren't so special. And that's twofold. On the one hand, it's like, you're not so special this way, but then guess what? You're not defective either. And they need to come to what's called equanimity, and recognizing sort of like the fairness of all human lives, and stop doing this comparison thing so much. They need to get off the comparison teeter-totter and just really start to dive in and love their life, and themselves as not this somehow very, very different defective person, but just start to recognize themselves as a human. Again, it's very heartwarming to watch them discover all of that. For all the types, when you can just drop that, what seems so important life quest, and start to live more moment to moment, it's like, wow. Then all of the gifts of your type are still there. It's like, you don't have to give up any of your strengths, and the weaknesses are a lot easier to deal with. You don't take them so seriously, and the gifts of all the other types start to become available. Because the Enneagram, if you look at it as a psychological scale, basically you can have really, really psychologically bereft 9 types, and then you can have really psychologically sound 9 types. And Riso and Hudson talk about that as the levels of health. So when somebody is a very healthy, functioning type X, it's not that easy to tell what type they are. Like, they actually have a lot of the gifts of a lot of the types, and they can seem like a lot of the, like, it's not that easy to see what type they are. The more sort of unhealthy they are, the easier it is to see their type, because it's on full display. But so when you start to loosen your fixation and loosen your passion and balance your instincts, then what happens is you become a full human. Like, all 9 of the things that we talk about when we talk about the strengths of the 9 types are available to everybody. Like, those are just parts of being human, and all of those strengths become available to you. So the goal is never to switch types. You don't switch types. That would be like Sybil, like multiple personality.
Yeah.
You don't switch types. The goal is to loosen the illusions of your own type.
Did
and
you
when
talk
you
about 7?
Nope, I just did 2, 3, 4. So we got to do 5, 6, 7. 5, 6,
Oh,
7.
okay. I wasn't sure. Yeah.
The 5, 6, 7 are the head types. But I'm just trying to tell you that you pick up a lot of what people see. Like, if people see healthy 3s as successful, goal-oriented.
Yeah.
If you stopped being a self-loathing 4 and you were able to do a lot more things and be a lot more successful, it's not like you became a 3. You just stopped blocking the strength that 3s naturally pick up because of their weakness. It's like we all pick something, and it makes us pick one strength over all the others. It gives us a weakness. But anyway, our goal is to just be all 9 at their healthiest. That's really the goal. So 5, 6, and 7.
Wait. Our goal is to embody all 9
at the high side.
What's that?
The high side.
The high side. So we want we don't want the shadow side. We want the high side of all 9. Because when you're talking about, like, I identified with quite a few of the, especially the 3. I identify a lot with the 3. I was very competitive as a child. I always wanted to be better than everyone. I've got this story that I tell about some boy visiting, and we lived on a cul-de-sac, and I had just gotten new shoes, and they were red. I think they were red. And I said to him, I just got new shoes. I can run faster than you. He says, your shoes don't make you fast. I said, you want to make it? Want to bet? I'll race you to the end. And man, I had to go so fast, but I beat that kid by this much. and it was a boy, and then I, unfortunately didn't pursue that as a kid, didn't pursue sports. I went another direction, but it's just interesting that, you talk about competitiveness of the three, and I'm very competitive, and that sort of thing. So,
But the thing is that any of the 9 types could do any behavior. The question is why. So if, for example, you're an 8, then by competing and winning, that gave you power
okay,
and made you less vulnerable,
right,
right? So the why they do it, whereas with the 3, they want the applause. They want people to applaud them. To the 8, it's really not about getting applause. It's about maintaining control and power, and the 8 wants to feel life. The 8, the passion is called lust, and it's not necessarily sexual lust, but it's that intensity of life. The 8s have more energy than the other types, and they want to feel alive, and they want to feel power in whatever way that is. And so 8s are also obviously very competitive. It's funny because there's a big debate in the Enneagram community about which type Trump is, and the 2 strongest guesses that people have are 3 and 8.
yeah,
And, when they're arguing for 3, they're looking at how pompous he is and how much he's always saying, I'm the best, I'm the best, I'm the best, I'm the best. I did this better, bigger, better, like all this pompous, like, look at me, applaud me, applaud me. But when they say 8, it's because of his, absolute, he just says what he wants to say, let the chips fall where they may. Whereas a 3 is like a political chameleon. The 3 doesn't
right,
want conflict or anything like that. They just want to get to the top. He acts very 8ish in his bullying and his vengeance and, things like that.
right.
But then 8s usually don't care what people think about them the way that he does, right? So I'm going to just take this moment to explain a couple of potential things. One is that um, we will pick up overlays. Like, these are 9 human dilemmas. They're 9 human existential, egoic structures. And so we're all going to have all 9 to some degree anyway, number one. Number two, the way that the Enneagram works, every type automatically has a very interesting relationship with the type before them and the type after them when you're going clockwise around the circle. So as an 8, you have what's called a 7 wing, and you have a 9 wing. And what that really means is that your type is sitting right between the issues of the 7 and the 9. The
Yeah.
8 is almost born out of the tension between what's going on at 7 and what's going on at 9. So 8ness is automatically related to 7ness and to 9ness on the spectrum of this human dilemma, right? So a lot of people have a really close relationship with one of their wings. So people will say, I'm an 8 with a 7 wing, which means I'm like really, really an 8 at the core, but I'm a lot like a 7. So like me personally, I'm a 7, but really strong 8 wing. I don't have the psychology of an 8, not really ever about power and vulnerability. The psychology is all 7. But my behaviors and my energy patterns and all those kinds of things are really 8ish. So it's like I'm sitting very close to the 8 on the circle, but psychologically I'm a 7. So it's kind of like where you're sitting on that circle has a lot to do with how much your one or the other of your wings is going to play into it. And a lot of people talk about the wings as your shadow and your ally. A lot of people talk about switching wings, like you might really rely on one wing. Like I had no fear growing up. 6 wing, what's a 6 wing? I did not know fear, but I had a very strong 8 wing. After all kinds of life crises, I suddenly have, much more of a 6 wing, like a lot more fear and paranoia in my life. So you can switch the emphasis of the wings throughout your lifetime, but you're always going to have a relationship with those 2 types. Then the next thing is, if you've seen the Enneagram, there's lines cutting across all over the place.
Yeah.
The 2 types that you are connected to by a line are opposite to your type in one way or the other. So as an 8, you're connected to 5. 5 is completely opposite to 8 in the sense that it's very introverted, it's very withdrawn, it's very withholding, it's very protected, like a tortoise inside of its shell. versus the 8, which is just like, I'm big, come at me, come on, like instead of expansion, there's this contraction. There's a real opposite there. You're also connected to 2. And 2 is that openly loving, very heart-oriented, very lovey-lovey, sweet, wants to be the wind beneath the wings of people. Quite opposite of the 8, who doesn't want to be vulnerable and wants to be the one that's controlling power, at least for themselves, right? Those are very opposite. So what happens is that as you do your thing, as your number, you'll find yourself zigging over to the 5 and to the 2 to try to almost balance yourself back out again. It's like a rubber band, right?
Huh?
So, and kind of roughly, you got to be careful with this, but you'll see it in a lot of books where they'll say that one of those directions is stress or disintegration, and the other direction is flow or integration. That's been debunked. Most people say you can go to both under either circumstance, but there is some truth to the idea that one of those directions is one that we go to almost automatically, and that's the one that's typically known as stress. So for 8, going to 5, it's like when everything else isn't working and, it's like all bets are off or whatever, the 8 will just pull in and be totally introverted and like go into the cave and figure it out. Go to their intellect, they'll go to their head, and they'll go to that protected spot and, before emerging again. And in flow, where the 8 is, feeling magnanimous and pretty good with themselves, they're going to go over to 2, and they're going to do what a lot of 8s are well known for, which is protecting family and friends and being the, sort of like the very benevolent leader who's strong for everyone, and the loving, like the lion heart, it comes out. So people call that the direction of flow for the 8. But in truth, you could actually go to 2 in stress, or you could go to 5 in flow, but you're going to go to 2 a lot, and you're going to go to 5 a lot. Like those are 2 positions that if you're an 8, you should be relatively familiar with.
Yeah.
So every time you know your type, you're already 5 types out of the 9. But it's a matter of how is it wired? That's really what it's about. It's not about which box do I fit in. It's how is this whole thing wired, and how is this subconsciously driving me so that I can be more cognizant of it. I can be more aware, I can be more awake, and I can be more present. I can be more just true in the moment rather than being run by patterns that I don't even realize are going on.
Got it.
Yeah.
So we still
So
get through 5 through 7, right?
5 through 7. Okay. So the little 5, as I said before, most people believe you're born your type, and they have found, not the Enneagram authors, but other scientists have found 9 temperaments that babies are born with. And of course, the Enneagram crowd has correlated those. So the little 9 is born with a very hypersensitive temperament, where it seems like the world is extremely overbearing and intrusive and prickly, like annoying. And the 5 is, trying to protect itself from this intrusion. And so they become kind of prickly. And the little 5 decides that the world is trying to intrude on you and trying to take your energy. And so the 5 becomes like a little energizer battery. I have to protect this life force of mine. And I've got to run my life in a way that doesn't allow that flame to be blown out. I can't allow people to steal all my energy. I have to protect myself. And they become, because they're a head type, they start to use their head as the power. Knowledge is power. And so I need to hoard knowledge. I need to know. I need to figure it out. They become the most analytical, the most observant, the most disconnected. Like their standard psychological move is to disconnect energetically from people, from situations, from emotions, from whatever. They want to be detached. So their move is detach and observe and protect my energy. And so a lot of people, when they look at shallow books on the Enneagram, they think that the 5 is the person who's the thinker, the person who's smart, the person who's the scientist, the person who's this. And so they think if they like books, if they like knowledge, if they like information, they must be a 5. No. 5s tend to do that. Yes. So do a lot of other types. ones included. There's a lot of intellectual people of all 9 types. The thing that makes you a 5 is that avarice. It's that withholding. It's that clinging to your energy force and feeling like the world is trying to steal it from you. It's that preserving of your energy and thinking that you need to use your head as the way that you navigate the world while you disconnect and hold yourself energetically back. It's a very specific character. And so anyway, the little 5's journey, or the 5's journey, is to realize there's no way that light's going to go out. Like, there isn't anything actually to hold on to. It's really not like that. You're not really an Energizer battery. And if you actually were to just stay engaged and stay emotionally engaged and socially engaged, and you were to just work through that point where you thought that there was oblivion, you would find out, guess what? It's not there. There is no oblivion. And when they can start to ease up on that self-protection and start staying attached more frequently, emotionally and socially and all those different things, then they can start to blossom in ways that they never allowed themselves to before. So that's another really interesting character. I love 5's. And then 6's, I like all the types, but yeah, I have my favorite. Anyway, and 7 goes to 5, 8 goes to 5. We both love the 5's. Anyway, the 6. So the 6 is the quintessential fear type. The little 6's fixation is literally fear, and the passion is cowardice. So the little 6 decided the world is scary. Oh my God, like, you never know what's going to happen next. It's crazy. Like, who knows what's going to happen? Who knows how we're going to get hurt? And they're a mental type. So they start freaking out about it, right? So it's the birth of paranoia. So the 6 is a really interesting character because naturally they develop their intuition. Because of the decision they made, they naturally do have higher intuition than most people. The problem is, throughout their lifetime, how they ever tell the difference between their genuine intuition about something and their paranoia, because they do both so strongly most of the time that unhooking that and figuring that out is the journey for the 6, because their mind is so active and they think of all the worst case scenarios. They get a bad rap of being like negative thinkers, like you need to think positive. They hate that because they want the positive outcome. They're working towards the positive outcome, but they believe that by seeing everything that can go wrong, then they could prevent it. And if they can prevent it, then we'll all have the positive outcome. So they insist on thinking of the negative worst case scenarios and imagining all the things that could go wrong because they believe it is protecting them. And to me, this is one of the most interesting characters because it's one of the hardest ones I've seen to unhook. It's very hard for them to drop it because it's been so rewarded. It's like if you were paranoid about a job interview or a date and you were worrying, and because you were worrying, you were taking precautions and doing things and whatever, and then you went through the interview and it went badly, then you'd be able to say, see, I was right. Right?
Yeah.
But if you went through the interview and it went well, then you'd be able to say, thank God I worried about it and I did all that prep work because that's why it went well. And so either way, your paranoia is reinforced by absolutely everything that happens in your life.
Have you read the book The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer? So it's really interesting because when you describe the 6, it's almost like you're describing the voice inside the head in the similar way to Michael Singer, right?
Yeah.
Where
and he says, put it on the couch.
It takes both sides, right?
Exactly.
It takes both sides. It says, you did really good. And then, screw you, you're a mess up. Right. And there's nothing good about you. And so the voice takes both sides. And that's exactly what it sounds like you're talking about there.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think all 9 types have a version of a voice. Definitely some types have more obvious voices than others. I would say 1 and 6 have the most obvious, sort of like inner chatter. But a 6 would usually say that what they have is an inner committee. They literally have, whereas a 1 has a very punitive, clear inner critic. Whereas the 6, it's not really about inner criticism. It's about all the things that could happen and all the things we need to think about. So just like, remember how I said in each of the triads, one of the types kind of like does flaming strong. The other one kind of does the opposite. And the one in the middle is kind of like asleep to the issue. 9 is asleep to anger. 3 is asleep to emotions. And 6 is asleep to mental power. They're very aware that their mental mind is going all the time, but they don't trust it. They don't have a strong sense of, I'm a mental type, therefore I know.
Yeah.
What they have is, I don't know. Yes, but, no, but, it's this constant doubt. Doubt is a huge feature of the 6.
Mhm.
And it's very hard for them to, like I said, get in touch with what is their true and genuine intuition and what is this paranoid thought process. And so I think books like The Untethered Soul are fantastic for 6s, because they need to do what he says and imagine that voice is sitting over on the couch saying all of that. What
Right.
would you say then? It's like you have to take away its power, not give it so much credence in one's life. Very similar to the 1. But 6s are interesting too, because if they like, for example, get into faith, if they suddenly became very, very faithful and they believe in God and they believe that God is protecting them, and or if they fall into I would say a cult or something where some strong leader somehow convinces them that if they just follow that they will be safe, a 6 a lot of times would be so happy to get rid of all of that thinking that they just throw that out the window and blindly trust. And so then again, you talk about Enneagram tests, then they don't test as a 6 because they think that they have total faith. They don't recognize the underpinning of all of that, which was that doubt and that paranoia. So they have to go another layer deeper if they have inserted something that gives them faith.
Yeah.
But what they need to just do is recognize that the big theme here all through their life is definitely about doubt and faith, fear and courage. That's the theme. And then they can kind of go from there. But a lot of 6s will say, I don't know, I just don't have that much doubt. I just believe whatever it is that they've decided to believe.
Wow.
We also have a counterphobic 6, which is very different from most 6s in that rather than acting fearful, the counterphobic 6 is like, I can't handle fear. And so they just charge right into whatever it is that they're scared of. So they act very much like 8s, but they don't have the solidity, the calmness, the let the chips fall where they may. They're fueled by that fear and paranoia, but they're running around acting like 8s, sort of like challenging all their fears. So a lot of people think Trump is a counterphobic 6. Let's throw that one out there. But I'll finish the 7 and then I'll go back to why it's not so easy to tell one type sometimes with somebody. So the 7, the little 7 decided that the world is very restrictive. Like the world just wants to grab you and calm you down and restrict you from doing what you want. The little 7 is very keen on getting what they want. The passion is called gluttony, and the fixation is about planning all of the positive possible future potential goodies that are out there. So the 7 is like this very gleeful little kid who wants to just go out and explore the world and have fun and have everything be great and wonderful. And the world just seems to want to restrict you and tie you down and not give you what you want. And so they become kind of similar to the 8, a little bit of a rebel. But rather than it being about power, they don't really feel like there's enemies and stuff like that out there. They just feel like there's chains, there's restrictions, there's cages and stuff like that. So they can be rebellious against the rules if it feels like a chain, not because somebody's trying to have power. So the 7 and the 8 have a very interesting relationship. They're both assertive types. 3, 7, and 8 are the most assertive and the most competitive. 3, 7, and 8 are all, but the 7's usually doing it for the fun. It's like, hey, this is cool, this is fun, let's see if we can win. The 8 wants to have power and control, and the 3 wants to get the applause. So they're all doing it for different reasons, but they can look alike in a lot of ways. So the 7's journey is recognizing that this deep inner hunger isn't real. 7 and 4 actually, there's so much depth to the Enneagram we don't have time to get into, but 7 and 4 actually have a similar childhood wounding. And so they both feel utterly abandoned and, rejected to fend for themselves. But because the 4 is an emotional type, they actually never forget that pain, and it becomes part of their identity, and they seek to explore it and understand it their entire life. The 7, being a mental type, they're not wired to be an emotional type. They're wired to be a mental type. So they just kind of like, you know what? That does not feel good. Let's lock that in a titanium vault, never look back, and let's just have fun. Like, let's replace it. So a 7 is kind of like a 4 on Prozac. Like they don't recognize that there's any depression under there, or they don't recognize that there's any pain under there. But that's actually the source of it. And how it shows up for the 7 is a hunger. So when the 7 sees something that they want, it literally feels like it would be death if they didn't get it. Because the little 7 decided that they could starve. The little 7 is a baby whose mother is not coming with the milk. So they have a deep, the 5, 6, and 7, the head types, their core emotion is fear. So the 7 doesn't really recognize fear or feel fear. What they just feel is a zest for life. But what they don't realize is that's really a fear of starvation and complete deprivation of any sort of love and support. And that's locked in a vault that they don't ever want to look at. And it manifests as, oh, I love this. Oh, I love that. Oh, I love this. Oh, I love that. And it's next. They can never fill themselves up more. They can never fill themselves up enough because they're filling a void that they're not even acknowledging.
Yeah.
And so all of their zest for life is really just a cover up. And for a 7 to get to a point where, first of all, they realize that and can trace it back. And second of all, they can actually allow themselves to sit in the pain and the horror and the suffering of being a completely unwanted, unloved child. Like actually get that and get that they actually feel that and start to heal that and realize that that's an illusion. I mean, it was never true, but somehow that's what the 7 concluded. And so to get back to that initial wounding and be able to deal with it and work with that starts to calm down that gluttony. I mean, as a funny story, when I first learned the Enneagram a long time ago, they didn't have Amazon.com, but they had Barnes and Noble's superstores. And I do 7 in 5 world. In other words, my gluttony is books. I have over 9,000 books and they're all cataloged. I've got them all queued. I know where they all are. I'm like obsessed with books. Can never have enough books. And so I would walk into Barnes and Noble as an exercise. Not only would I not buy a book, which you can ask my husband, there's no time I ever walked into a Barnes and Noble without spending a minimum of $100 ever in my lifetime. So I would do it, like I'd walk in there, not buy a book, but not only not buy one, I would go find one that I thought was the book of the century that I had to have, the knowledge that I had to have. And I would be so obsessed with this book, put it back on the shelf and walk out of the store without buying it. And this might sound crazy, but when you understand how real the 9 structures are for the 9 types, then you have to think from what it would be from your perspective to understand what it is for a 7. I would go out and sit in my car and just watch myself, just feel the unbelievable panic and pain and drama that my system would go through in not getting that book.
It sounds like CBT, right? It's really what people do in cognitive behavioral therapy. It's like you were doing your own CBT.
It's like, how could this possibly matter?
Yeah.
But when you start to realize that it's just pointing to something and it gets you in touch with it. So now we've done all of them. I was just going to say that the other reason why, besides the fact that you have the 2 wings and you have the 2 line points, which are going to be very familiar positions to you in working with your own. But the other thing is that some people, my friend Catherine Favre, developed a theory that most people have endorsed, but I got to tell you, a lot of people don't endorse. So out in the Enneagram world, there's people who do not believe in this theory. But Catherine believes that Ichazo, the original guy who mapped on the types, did believe in this, and she believes that she has enough evidence to prove that this is true. And the theory is called tri-type. So tri-type is the theory that of the gut types, 8, 9, and 1, and then the image types 2, 3, 4, and then 5, 6, 7, you actually have one in each. In other words, your Enneagram type is one that leads. So let's just throw out there that you're an 8. So let's say you're an 8. So you lead with 8. That would say that you also have one of the 2, 3, 4. Like you have a 2, a 3, or a 4.
I have a 2.
And then
I have a 2 and a 7.
And a 7. So that's called your tri-type.
Yeah.
That's called your tri-type. And Catherine believes that people who have the same tri-type, even though they have a different order, because she still believes that you have one Enneagram type. I mean, for sure, that's the one you got to work on. Like, that's still the key. There's one type that you have to work on, and everything else will come as a result of that.
Yeah.
But she believes that you have these other 2, and they do very strongly influence sort of like the type of 8 that you are. So she believes that an 8 to 7 and a 7 to 8 are actually a lot more similar than 1 8 with another 8.
Yeah.
She believes that the tri-type brings the most distinction. Then the other theory that's really popular right now comes from originally Naranjo. So Ichazo mapped out the Enneagram. Naranjo's the one who put all the meat on the bones. Ichazo just put a passion, a fixation, and a subtype. That's it, just like words. Like, there's not very much meat on the bones. Naranjo, the psychoanalyst who just passed away just literally months ago, was the one who fleshed out all the meat of the bones, basically, of the modern Enneagram. So he says, like, Ichazo was like the father, I was like the mother that birthed, the basis of it all. So Naranjo's the one who believes that you have 3 subtypes from the self-pres, social, sexual, instinct imbalance. And so Beatrice Chestnut, her book called The Complete Enneagram, is the one who lays out Ichazo's 27 types, the 3 types of each of the 9 Enneagram types. That's the book. Ichazo has one in Spanish, but unless you read Spanish, you got to go to Beatrice Chestnut's Complete Enneagram. They believe that it's the subtype that makes the most difference in how, each of the Enneagram types shows up. So there's a lot of different theories out there. There's a huge crowd of scholars that have been working on the Enneagram for 30 something years. And, this is what we do at the IEA conferences every year, is we put out these theories, we debate the theories, and we get, everybody's position on them and whatnot. It's an evolving field. But what's happened recently with the publishing of The Road Back to You, which was published by Zondervan, which suddenly
put the again?
The Road Back to You by Ian Cron was published by Zondervan. And Zondervan is a Christian publisher. Up until that point in time, the vast majority of the Christian world believed that the Enneagram was of Satan.
Right.
And so they completely never touched it. And so that kept it out of a huge purview of the American public. And all of a sudden, when Ian Cron wrote The Road Back to You, and it didn't have the word Enneagram in the title, I don't know, but Zondervan published it. And Suzanne Stabile, whose husband is a preacher, she was the one who taught Ian Cron. Ian Cron himself has said that his background in the Enneagram is not very deep, actually.
Right.
He just kind of learned it from Suzanne, but he was so impressed by it that he wrote that book. And so suddenly you have a book that's just touching the surface of the Enneagram that gets released to the Christian world. And all of a sudden, churches across America are teaching the Enneagram. and I mean, it's an influx that we were not expecting. And in the last several years, all of a sudden, the Enneagram world has become, I don't know, this crazy world, because you have these scholars and these known teachers who have been, orbiting each other and working together. And, there's a community that has been advancing the Enneagram for 30 years. And then you have this new wave where everybody who reads a book is now an Enneagram expert, and it's turned it into kind of a parlor game of, like, which type are you? And if you're this type, you want this kind of Halloween treat. And so the real Enneagram world is reeling, wondering, do we care? I don't know. What do we do about that? I don't know. But
all
there's
publicity is good publicity.
Yeah, what the heck. But definitely you'll find that there's a lot of people who think they know the Enneagram, but what they really only know are some boxes with some behaviors connected to some types, and they
Sure.
don't even know what a passion and a fixation and the subtypes, and like they don't even know anything about the Enneagram.
Well, it sounds to me like there's just a whole lot more than you can get in an hour or an hour and a half. I mean, we're
Very
already
true.
we're already bumping up against an hour and a half. It's gonna be a great episode. I'm super excited about it. But what I wanted to ask you is that, number one, where can people take a test that's going to help them? I mean, do you recommend the Ian Cron site, or do you recommend somewhere else? Do you have a test that people can take?
Well, so yes, by the time this airs, I should have, I already have, it's there already. So my
Yeah.
site that has a test is called successstyle.com.
Okay.
And I'm gearing that toward, your strength, if you will. It's like, this is how you succeed in life. So I'm not gearing it towards the psychological side of things, because my background is basically business.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to use the Enneagram in leadership and in sales and in marketing and team building, and like I work with corporations. So for the purposes of that test, I think it's probably as accurate as any other free test that's out there, and you will get a report, somewhat about your type and a little bit of an overview of the Enneagram in general. And you will get on my list, and I'm going to start doing a lot more outreach. In fact, I'm starting a podcast with Michael Goldberg, who wrote the book, Getting Your Boss's Number and the 9 Ways of Working. And we're going to do a business oriented Enneagram podcast very soon.
Oh, great.
But anyway, so that's a free test. Another free test is actually at eclecticenergies.com. And I can't vouch for everything else that's on that site. That guy's got a collection of all kinds of weird stuff, but he's got a pretty good Enneagram test on there. He's got 2 of them. But eclecticenergies.
Yeah, I think that we want to keep it simple, and so we're going to go ahead and recommend your site. I think Success Style, because we want to keep it simple.
Okay.
The other question I wanted to ask you is, once somebody finds out their type, so like I took Ian Cron's test and I found out, the first time I took it, I came out a 1. I was like, this doesn't make sense to me. That I don't really identify with that. I took it again, I came out an 8. But obviously after talking to you, I have some perfectionistic type of characteristics, whatever. But the thing is that we get a type, and then you said, there's work to be done. So what's the next step? Once we get, we understand that our type is, I'm an 8. I'm assertive, and I want things my way, and I want to control everything. And it's, fuck you if you don't do it my way. And, that sort of thing, right? That's me. So what's the next best step for growth? Personal.
So to me, the best book for someone to start the journey is called The Wisdom of the Enneagram.
Okay.
And it's by my teachers, Don Riso and Russ Hudson. So Don passed away years ago, but Russ is still at the forefront of Enneagram. And I think anything Russ Hudson does, you got to do. He's phenomenal. But that book is very unique in that it really does a good job of not only giving someone a pretty good overview, but also very much honoring, the depths of all these different aspects. And then the second book that I would recommend is actually Beatrice Chestnut's The Complete Enneagram, because Russ doesn't really cover very much in The Wisdom of the Enneagram about how those 3 subtypes can play out very, very differently. And if somebody's having a hard time figuring out which type they are, like if you really see the depth of the Enneagram and you still can't figure out which type you are, then it's probably because you're one of the counter types. Because of each of the types has a counter type.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like that was what's driving it, but then for some reason you decided to thwart that. And your instinct is thwarting the drive itself. And so you have this very conflicted, oppositional thing going on. And so each of the types has a counter type, and the complete Enneagram will show that to you. So you might say, oh, I get it. I see why I didn't think I was a 7. It's because I'm not this selfish hedonist. I'm this out to save the world person that everybody thinks is a 2. Well, that's a social 7. The social 7 looks a lot like a 2. And, a self-pres 3 can look a lot like a 1, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of these look-alike things that come out in the complete Enneagram. So I would recommend The Wisdom of the Enneagram first, And then I would recommend the Complete Enneagram second.
Now, my last question for you is, can we go around from 1 to 9, and can you give me an example of a famous person of each type?
Oh, you have no idea how much I hate that.
Just
I'm actually like the worst person in the world for that, because I'm on record everywhere railing against that particular, for almost every type. That's a good question. If I could think of one that nobody would dispute, people debate it. So like if I say this person's a 2, there's another famous Enneagram teacher who will say that person's not a 2.
so here's what we'll do. We'll say this is in your opinion and what you've seen, how this person has acted. This is the type you expect. So let's just pick some people. Oprah.
She's hotly debated. Some people think she's a 2 and some people think she's a 3.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, I would really rather not do that. What I will do, I'll go around the 9 and I'll give you sort of a caricature
Okay.
of each. Okay.
Okay, that's
so
fair.
rather than a famous person, because famous people are typically saying what their handlers tell them to say, or they've played a movie role, or they've got some goal in mind. You never know why they're acting the way they're acting. It may not be their true motives, right? And it's very hard to say.
And
And
how their
again,
public persona is may not
right.
be what the
And
real
you're
thing is.
looking at their behavior
Yeah.
rather than, sort of like what's
Sure.
really going on under the
Okay,
surface.
so I think that's fair. So let's go around and just do a caricature.
Type 1, no matter what, is going to be somebody who's very kind of uptight. They're going to be somebody who has high standards. They're striving for continuous improvement. It really matters to them that things get better. And so you can kind of just think of those type of almost a school marm, caricature. But again, the subtypes can
Elizabeth
change.
Warren.
High standard. What's that?
Elizabeth Warren.
You know what? Again, not completely.
I know.
I wouldn't say 100% say that, but some do think she's a 1. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So, and a type 2. So a type 2 is a charming. They're always charming. They're charming. They're seductive. They're very relationship oriented. They definitely care about the relationships in their life, and they're a person who strives to be caring and helpful. Okay. So like a sweetheart, like America's sweetheart, with a lot of energy behind it, which is different than the 9, who's just doing it because they happen to be there. But a 2 is doing it on purpose.
Meg Ryan.
Okay, I'll give you that one.
Okay.
The 3 is a pragmatic, definitely pragmatic, very competitive, hardworking achiever that focuses on achieving success in roles and goals.
Bill
Get it done.
Gates.
Oh, most people think he's a 5.
Really?
Yeah. So there's another interesting thing about Enneagram. We're not looking at the symbol, but if you take the symbol and you make every possible set of 3 triangles, then you're going to end up with these different relationships that exist. And we don't have time to get into that, but 1, 3, and 5 are all what we call the competency types.
Okay.
So they all, making sure that they do their job well is makes up a big part of their self-esteem. That's true for 1, it's true for 3, and it's true for 5.
So would you say that like most professional athletes then might be a 3?
Yeah, and most, any celebrity with a big, huge smile on their face who wants to grab the camera every time they can, that's definitely
or a Michael Phelps, perhaps.
I actually don't know him very well. So, I mean, I know who he is, but I wouldn't even guess about his type.
Sure.
Okay, so then the type 4. Type 4s are always deep, very sensitive. They're very individualistic, introspective. You might say they're moody. They have a lot of kind of highs and lows, and more than any other type, their mood will affect their performance. Because it's the most true thing for them. So they can't ignore their moods and their emotional responses to things. So in a way, they're one of the most emotional types. The other really emotional type is a 2. But a 2 is usually very positively emotional, whereas the 4 tends to be a little bit more on the moody emotional side of things.
I'm trying to think of a famous person who might be a 4, like a Joel Osteen, maybe.
Johnny Depp. I mean,
okay.
But a lot of people might say he's a 5 too. So again, so they strive to express themselves uniquely and authentically. Okay. Then the 5 is a detached, withdrawing analyst type. So they're definitely not this really engaged person. They're more of a detached person. They gather knowledge, they protect their energy. So above all, don't surprise a 5. They don't like surprises. They want to be able to predict and manage their life and their expectations of other people. So they tend to be the most obviously introverted. Like, it's pretty hard to imagine an extroverted 5. Although supposedly a lot of rock music stars could be 5s. They just put on this whole persona. It's like a puppet running the show out there, but really they're very, very conserving of their energy. So the 6 is an authority questioning, troubleshooting loyalist. Like, those are the most, they question authority all the time. So do 8s, but 8s are doing it more from a bravado stance, whereas the 6 is like, can they be trusted? Can they not be trusted? But they're very troubleshooting. They're always going to be finding all the things that could go wrong so that we can try to make sure that they don't. They're very loyal. One of the reasons why 6s have a hard time making decisions is because they know that once they commit, they're going to be committed. They're going to be so loyal, and they don't want to be wrongly loyal. They don't want to be wrongly committed. So it's very hard for them to commit, but they're very much interested in being committed. And they're always looking at what could go wrong and how to prevent that, obviously. The 7 is usually a pretty enthusiastic. That's a word that I think every 7 deserves the word enthusiasm. Enthusiastic, very future-oriented, very visionary, focused on positive outcomes of what's possible. So they're always looking at the potential. They're always looking at what could be. They're always thinking of the next great future and all the options. They hate to be trapped. The 8 is a tough, no nonsense, very straight shooting. It's a protector. It's somebody that we can count on to protect us because they know how to defend. They know how to challenge. They know how to fend off a challenge. They know how to be powerful and protective. And the 9 is usually a very laid back character. They're almost like almost a little fuzzy. The eye gaze is usually not quite so fierce. It's very fuzzy. They're an accommodating, very easygoing, comfort seeking, harmony, peace. They just want to avoid conflict. So they're not going to be extremely opinionated. They're not going to be standing up. They're just going to be kind of going along. And the fun thing about 9s is that if somebody else is having a conflict, the 9 is a great mediator. They can see this side, they can see that side, they can try to bring people together, no problem. But if somebody tries to have a conflict directly with the 9 just sort of disappears because everything in their whole makeup was designed to never have conflict. So they don't even understand how it could be happening because they never intentionally get into conflict. But usually they're just very easygoing, affable people that most people get along with great.
Wow.
So that's kind of an overview. Yeah, celebrities. I don't know.
Okay, well that's fine. So I think I do want to be mindful of time. We've been going for quite a while. It's going to be a long episode, and thanks for everybody who stays to the end here. Stephanie, thanks so much for being a part of the Menopause Movement podcast. I'm sure that there's going to be a ton of questions for you, and we'll probably have you back to answer some questions.
Yeah, that'd be great. And in fact, we didn't really cover how potentially menopause gets affected by the Enneagram. Having gone through menopause myself and some of what you brought up earlier about weight loss and stuff like that, once people have kind of a grasp of the types and we've talked about their issues, we could do another one literally talking about how those kinds of issues creep into life changes. That's huge.
Yeah. So any questions that you have for Stephanie, if you send them to me at drgordon@menopausemovement.com, and we will, that's Dr. Gordon, not doctor spelled out, but it's Dr. Gordon @menopausemovement.com. And we'll have Stephanie back to answer your questions. It'll be awesome.
All right.
All right. Thanks so much, Stephanie.
You're welcome.